right, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Off the Clock with Carboni. This is an in-depth, hopefully entertaining, hopefully informative podcast and chat that we do every week on Fridays with somebody that makes Charlotte sports great and can lend us some great perspective into our favorite local team. So by the time you're watching this or listening to this, I'll be unplugging for the weekend, long 3-day weekend at the lake, taking our small bubble to another small bubble. So I think it's appropriate that I bring in like the king of relaxing and unplugging, play-by-play man for the Charlotte Hornets, John Focke, who, like, what mountain are you coming off of this week, John? Because I think you were like 10,000 feet above sea level and weren't receiving any messages for the first part of the week.
Yeah, I was. We just came off 4 days and 3 nights on the Appalachian Trail. We started at I believe it's the Nantahala Outdoor Center and went down to Winding Stair Gap and then back. So we were supposed to go 5 days and 4 nights, but we got hit with some serious rain on Monday morning, like as soon as we packed up. So rather than trying to pitch the tent in the rain and deal with all that, we just decided we were going to put in a really long day and get back to the car. But it was beautiful. I mean, there were some punishing climbs going up, but it was absolutely worth it for some of the views we had. And like one morning waking up above the clouds and just like, I mean, it looked like we were looking out at the ocean. It was just clouds and then, you know, the peaks to some of the mountains and stuff around. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff.
You've certainly taken advantage of all that since you've been here. Kudos to you. I need to do a better job of that. So, John, this is off the clock, but we started with 30 seconds on the clock. So we're going to put 30 seconds on the clock and do a little rapid fire. I mean, this is the really, really hard-hitting stuff here. So if you're ready, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right, let's see. Favorite hike in North Carolina. There you go.
Favorite hike in North Carolina. Boy, it's the one I just did. Every time, no matter what.
Nantahala, is that what you said?
Yeah. That one was really good. I would even go back to, we did a stretch of the Appalachian Trail from Carver's Gap to 19E, and that involved a number of beautiful balds. So in kind of the Roan Highlands area. So I would say that one probably tops the list.
All right. Well, we're past our 30 seconds. I did have to get this one from you. Favorite 2019 John Focke Charlotte Hornets radio call?
Ooh, probably the actually, you know what? I always say the Malik Monk game winner against Detroit because that's just like it was such an iconic moment. But yeah. I'm actually going to switch it up. I'm going to go to the win at Madison Square Garden against the New York Knicks. Devonte Graham wasn't necessarily like a game winner. It was a go-ahead basket, but there was still some time left on the clock.
They get it in. P.J. Washington off to Devonte. Straightaway 3. Got it! Oh, my! Devonte Graham! Oh, baby. With 2.1 seconds left, the Hornets go up 103-102. Are you kidding me? Oh, wow.
But the way that play set up and how much fun it was to have the inbounds comes to PJ and flip it off to Devonte and hitting that straightaway 3. I'll go with that one as my favorite call.
Was that the one where he was like kind of he had like a good head start and he ran down
the court? Yeah, he was running from the backcourt. Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a great play drawn up by JB. And we saw it run actually that same play a couple different times in late clock situations or late game situations. And so it was fun to see that. It was fun to be there in the moment and then to see it another, a couple times throughout the season.
Yeah, and for those of you listening on Spotify and iTunes, I'll put that play up while John's talking about it on our YouTube version of this podcast. Really, really just kind of takes you into the basketball savvy mind of James Borrego and the stuff he can draw up in those late game situations. So, John, I just want to start. We'll get into the Hornets. We'll get into everything going on in the NBA, but you're still fairly new to us. Came here last off season to take over as the voice of the Hornets radio, and we enjoyed you, but you got cut short a little bit. Only 65 games for obvious reasons. So what was the experience like here in your first year?
It was incredible. I mean, from the minute we got here, the team, the coaching staff, the organization, just everybody did such a great job of making us feel comfortable, making us feel welcome. And, I just love last off season, we had, the opportunity to be in the gym with the guys as they were working out and get to know those guys. sit down and do some podcast interviews similar to this with a number of the guys that were working out. And so that was great, getting to know them before we got into the season and developing some relationships. And then, Nick, I tell everybody, like, everywhere we went, how's the first season going? How's the first season going? Like, it was so fun. Like, I can't express that enough. Like, from going to the practices to covering shoot-arounds to preparing for the games, doing the games, obviously was incredible, but having the opportunity just to, be around this game in this way. NBA basketball is something that I've loved my entire life, and had an incredible opportunity for 12 years with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx, and, moving to Charlotte and getting to know a new fan base, getting to know a franchise that I didn't grow up following. It's just been so fun learning and learning all the different stories. So, I mean, the first year was outstanding. It's a bummer that it was cut short because, I mean, man, those last couple of weeks, like, the team was playing good. You could see the improvement. I think that made it so much fun. And for me, it was a blast, So, yeah, I would just say that first year was outstanding.
Yeah. And, being in this business, all these different stops along the way, they feel like home after a while, if they're the right spot. So it sounds like that's happening for you, but where is home for you?
Home is the Twin Cities. So I grew up in St. Paul and went to school in Ohio, and then spent a lot of time kind of in the upper Midwest starting out my career. But yeah, the bulk of my time growing up was in St. Paul.
And, great, run there with the Lynx and the Timberwolves. You were the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Lynx WNBA franchise. You did a lot of programming and a lot involved with the Timberwolves as well. But there's only 30 NBA radio play-by-play voices. So how did that call come about for you? And, had you been up for other jobs and been disappointed in it, what was it like to go through the process of getting the Charlotte Hornets play-by-play game?
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. And I think anyone who has one of these jobs would tell you it's a dream come true. And, when I was offered the position, it was almost like, wait a minute, what? Like, you've been working, working for an opportunity for so long that you kind of, you don't realize what it's going to feel like when you have that opportunity. And so, as you mentioned, I was fortunate to spend so much time back in my home state working for the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx, and just an incredible opportunity there. And then to be able to take everything that I learned from being the studio host and executive producer of the Timberwolves radio network to the years that I spent doing play-by-play for the Minnesota Lynx, and kind of to be able to combine those things into this position here in Charlotte, it was amazing. And, I think back to that first phone call to my wife. I think back to the first phone call to my dad and my mom after, securing that. And it was incredible. It was really, really fun. It was an unbelievable couple of weeks there as news came out, and I got to hear from so many people around the NBA, around the WNBA, around just the sports scene in the Twin Cities that I gotten to know over the years. And so, unbelievable opportunity. I'm incredibly fortunate and grateful for it. And just, really, really enjoyed that first year and looking forward to many more.
Well, you're not a rookie with the Hornets anymore, but I always ask the rookie players this after they get drafted, because, like, at some point it hits you who your boss is, and way up the chain, that'd be owner Michael Jordan. So, like, when did that hit you? Have you had any interactions with him in the last year since you've been hired?
Not really. And I think it's kind of funny. So growing up, my younger brother was the biggest Michael Jordan fan. I mean, it was like his whole room covered. I mean, he had the Chicago Bulls. He even had a Chicago Bulls locker, but he didn't have like a Chicago Bulls locker. He had the full locker with the Jordan everything. Then he also had a Foot Locker, like a smaller one. So, yeah. I mean, everything was Jordan with this kid. And as soon as I got back into the, to the Twin Cities and had a chance to sit down with him, he was just like, do you realize, like, MJ is your boss, essentially? And he was so stoked about it. And then it was like, oh, wow, yes, that's pretty wild. So, him reminding me was probably that moment where it hit.
All right, John, let's get into this season and start where it ended for the Hornets, because it's such kind of a seminal moment in American history and American sports history. March 11th, Hornets are down in Miami. You're calling the game. You're in the middle of calling a great game for the Hornets. And meanwhile, in Oklahoma City, the NBA is about to shut down for good until, obviously July. So what was that night like? Did you have any idea that particular moment was happening in real time? Because I know the players, they said they found out when they got in the locker room after that big win.
Yeah, it was a surreal night. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the way that game started, I want to say Miami hit 16 of their first 19 shots. Hornets are down by 20. Then they start chipping away at the beginning of the second quarter. You get really caught up in how that game was going and how the team was playing. They buckled in on the defensive end. They got cooking on the offensive end. Devonte Graham had a 30-point night. And so you're kind of lost in the broadcast. And then all of a sudden I think it was maybe late third quarter, early fourth quarter, or something like that, midway through the fourth, our engineer who sits next to me, he just kind of leaned over during a free throw and like tapped me on the shoulder. And I looked over, he was holding up his phone, and it was a tweet that said, NBA is going to suspend the season. And I was just like, wow, what? Because you'd see like in commercial breaks, you'd take a look at Twitter or something and you'd see something's happening in Oklahoma City and this and that. But it was just like, man, in the middle of this free throw, like that was so much to process. And without hearing anything from the NBA, like we weren't going to say anything on the air until you had official word from the league or from our organization saying that, hey, this is what's happening. But, it definitely took me by surprise. And once we got into the later stages of that game and things were becoming official, we were able to talk about it on the post-game show. But yeah, it was surreal. But it was such a fun night with the way the team was playing and came back to get that win that you're kind of stuck between these two worlds of like, I'm lost in this game. I'm having so much fun with this broadcast. And in the back of your mind, you're like, is this it? Is this real? And then when the game ended, it was very surreal because that was our second game of doing the socially distant interviews and stuff. So you had to go down and Borrego would sit at this podium and everyone had to stand back. And so it was just like trying to adjust to all that was surreal to begin with. And then with that news and everyone trying to hustle to get out of there, it was wild.
Yeah, it was. And I just personally thought James Borrego was so, good at summing it up that night and kind of putting it into a larger context. But, in terms of the team and that game was just such if that was the end, it was a great finishing game for this young team. Tell me about the way they played at the end there and what kind of gives you hope going into next season.
Well, I think what gives you hope is at the beginning of the season, they laid out the pillars, right? And these are the things that we want to hit. And then you could go through the season and look and see, hey, they are improving in that area, right? They became a very good defensive team over the final couple of weeks. They went on the road. They beat Toronto in overtime. They beat the Houston Rockets. They won some big games. They hung with some very good teams, and they did it thanks to their defense. And then offensively, I went back and watched the Atlanta game and the Miami game, the last two games just recently. And what I loved about it was offensively, yes, Devonte Graham and Terry Rozier were kind of your big guns, right? But as you start watching, and if you go back and watch those last couple of games, the ball is moving. And yeah, those guys are still getting, their shots and they're leading the way in scoring, but guys are knifing off them and flying around, and that ball's moving so much that's how you ended up with Caleb Martin going for 20 against Atlanta. That's how you ended up with, some of the big games that Miles had and PJ had and some of the other guys stepping up is because, when you look at assist rate, when you look at passes per game, all those things, it was the result of player movement and ball movement and guys getting good looks. And so the defense was getting better. The versatility on the defensive end, the ability to switch and stay in front of guys and contest by using, athleticism and length, and then the cutting and the ball movement, those things really, I think, give you a ton of encouragement about where this team is going and the fact that, it's hard after the All-Star break with young teams to continue to play at a high level, and I've seen that over the course of my career that, once you get past the All-Star break and you're still trying to get young guys minutes, how do you stay committed to the defensive end? How do you stay committed to your principles? And this team was able to do that, and I think that's incredibly encouraging.
All right. Well, I mean, I know the players are trying to stay sharp as they can without being in the bubble, and maybe there's going to be a second bubble. We don't know, and we don't know when the next season is going to start. But, like, how do you stay sharp? Like, are you, like, doing play-by-play of the walks with your dogs in the morning? I mean, how does a play-by-play guy that's used to night in, night out, and not this long of a layoff of whatever it ends up being? So what are you kind of up to on that front?
I mean, this layoff has been incredible. Like, if you think about it, so for 12 years, I was doing the NBA and the WNBA, and that meant like 2, maybe 4 weeks off in the spring and the fall, but hardly any time. Then last year was the first like real off season that I had. And it was an adjustment, not preparing for games, not, kind of being in that moment for what felt like a really long time. And that was nothing compared to what we're going through right now. So at the beginning of this, when we didn't know if we were coming back, I had the opportunity to do some NBA 2K games for the Venom, and that helped kind of stay sharp. When I thought that, hey, there's a chance we're going to be in this bubble and we might have to be broadcasting remote, I sat here at my kitchen table, pulled out my boards from the last couple of games, watched games through League Pass, and called them, sitting at my table. I'm sure my wife loved that, sitting right next to me trying to work, and I'm over to Devonte and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, they quickly find out how much we just scream and yell about sports with working from home.
But I think, overall, doing things like this, helps just keep you in the mindset of staying up on everything, and having basketball back has been outstanding. And, preparing for our podcast and some of the things that we're going to be talking about with certain guests, that really helps. And so, from an actual play-by-play standpoint, I think sometimes, as we're getting ready for dinner or whatever, I will just sit on the couch, turn a game on, turn the sound off, and in your mind, you're kind of just running through. So you remember like some of those memory calls of like, he's at the left angle, he puts it down, goes right around the screen. Some of those things just to keep your mind in that, so you don't forget some of the things. And just watching basketball helps. It's been a long time since we've sat and watched it. And obviously having the bubble back and everything has just been outstanding. So I'm not doing play-by-play of walking the dog, but when we were hiking, you'll love this, when we were hiking, we had one long stretch, and I'm used to talking for like 2.5 hours at a time, right? You're doing the broadcast either by myself or with Matt Carroll. And since I've been home, my wife and I talk, but it's not like I'm doing a 2-hour monologue. I don't think that would go over very well. So I started talking to the dog, and I was just, as we were hiking, we had like a couple of hours, and it's kind of a long stretch. It was hot, kind of got into a zone. And so I told the dog stories for about an hour, and my wife was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just keeping my voice sharp, so I know I can still talk for an hour straight."
My obvious follow-up is like, what did he say back?
It's amazing, Nick. My dog is a great listener. He's an incredible listener. He was just like, "Go ahead, bud. What else you got?"
Man, we all need to get out a little more, I think. Hey, John, I got to bring this up because it's fresh this week. I know we're all still a little peeved about it around here, but Devonte Graham not even being included in the most improved player finalists, and even Luka Doncic was kind of like indignant about that. I know we're all mad about it. We can't do anything about it, but can you just take us through what you saw up close with Devonte this year, improving his scoring average, among other things, 14.5 points from year 1 to year 2?
Well, first off, I was shocked when we came back and I saw that list, and Devonte wasn't on it. And I agree with Luka. Like, Luka went from good to great. You knew he was going to take a step. Like, if you watched him last year, some of the other guys, Brandon Ingram and Bam Adebayo, those guys took big strides. But, the difference, again, is they were good players to begin with. They were high draft picks to begin with. You expected those guys to play at a certain level, and over the last year they did. You mentioned Devonte scoring, and that's kind of the number that stands out to everybody, because it's just like, wow, this is a huge jump. He led the NBA in scoring increase from last year to this year. But the other thing is he averaged 7.5 assists per game. So not only is he generating 18 points per game that he's scoring, but he's putting out 7.5 assists per game. He was top 10 in the NBA in assists last year. And Ronald Norad joined me on Hornets assistant coach, joined me on our podcast last week or this week, I guess. And when we discussed it, he made a great point. Those other guys were playing NBA minutes last year. They were learning the NBA game. And you think about Brandon Ingram, a couple of years in the NBA, playing a ton. Doncic had the ball in his hands. He played a ton last year. Adebayo was getting a lot of NBA minutes. Devonte only averaged 14 minutes per game a year ago and played 43 NBA games. The rest of the time was spent in the G League. This was really his first opportunity playing consistent NBA minutes. And he made a huge jump from last year to this year. He didn't have the benefit of playing 25, 30 minutes a game a year ago and learning the NBA game. He had to learn through limited time in the NBA, putting in the work in the G League, putting in the work in the offseason, and that culminated in the season that we saw. So number one, I think what stood out to me is the assists to go along with the scoring increase, but also his mindset and his work ethic. That's what really stands out to me. And that, I think, is what is most encouraging as we move forward with this team.
Yeah, and of course, I will be taking my s'more-grams down to the lake this weekend.
Yeah.
The fireside. But I'm not sure there's like a sell-by date on them. We got them a couple weeks ago. But, yeah, great job by the Hornets marketing campaign with the nutritional facts, with the stats and stuff like that. John, who do you think could make a Devonte Graham-like jump next season for the Hornets?
Oof. I would say Jalen McDaniels.
Okay.
And I look at the Martin twins as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say Jalen McDaniels just for the sake of, rather than me talking about 5 people, because
could be a couple, yeah.
But I would say let's just say Jalen McDaniels, and kind of the same thing. Second round pick. Jalen was a later second round pick than Devonte was, but kind of followed that same path of starting in the G League, learning the game there, spending some time at the NBA, level and being around the guys for practices, and then going back down and putting in the work. But, you go back to those final couple of weeks of the season, and who was the first guy coming off the bench in the last couple of games? It was Jalen McDaniels. I just think with his length and his athleticism, he's 6'10", he's got a huge wingspan. He made some plays in those last couple of weeks that you wouldn't expect out of a late second-round pick who spent the bulk of the season in the G League. And he made those plays on the offensive end, but he also made them on the defensive end. And that, again, is what I think should be encouraging to fans is, this guy can come in and impact the game defensively while showing off some skills and showing a ton of potential on the offensive end. So I look at Jalen as a guy that maybe he doesn't take the 13.5 points per game leap that Devonte did, but I can see him taking a big leap and having a big impact on this team next season.
All right, John, we're going to let you go in a sec, but, we're all just kind of speculating at this point. We don't know what's going to happen, in 4 months, let alone 4 hours from now, as I still track all the college football and high school football stuff. But do you think we could be in a situation where all 30 NBA teams and yourself are starting the next season, whenever it starts, in a bubble?
I mean, like you said, at this point, I wouldn't rule anything out. And I think the biggest thing that we can take away from what we've seen this summer is the bubble is effective. Whether the NBA bubble, the WNBA bubble, the NHL bubble, they've found success in the model that they've built and the rules that they've set up to keep everybody safe. And so if that is the situation, we know that there's a blueprint there for it. And then you look at some of, Major League Baseball, obviously they're not in a bubble right now, and they've had some issues controlling things. And so if it does end up that, hey, this is the best option for next season, then we'll find a way to make it work. And I think, the league will find a way to make it work. But certainly we've seen the blueprint here, and they've been able to find success with it.
All right, he is John Focke, your radio voice of the Charlotte Hornets. You can find him on Twitter at JWFocke, F-O-C-K-E. There's a lot of great stuff for them, podcasts and the like. John, thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you in person real soon and, maybe in a bubble somewhere, I guess.
bubble, a mask, whatever, man. It'll be
We'll
great.
take it for basketball.
Yeah.